Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, everyone.
Last week, we made an introduction to the topic of influences. Tümerhan had explained us that there are two superuniverse influences and two interuniverse influences. And this evening, we will go deeper into the topic of influences. Alright, I start reading where we left last week. We previously mentioned that a prime influence coming from above brings out matter constitution by constituting a focus in the center of matter and gathering matter parts around it, and after going through various alterations in that matter, it starts to be transmitted outside of that matter, having been transformed into a low-quality energy, which is called the magnetic field of that matter. Similarly, we have said that the influence matter and bodies exert on each other is possible by the exchange of these magnetic fields as a result of contacts with each other. For example, if a being, A, wishes to accomplish some changes and manifestations in the structure of matter, B, it contacts its magnetic field which contains its own influences with the magnetic field of that matter. These influences which have transmitted from the magnetic field of matter to its structure cause the demanded motions and results occurring in that matter, in degree, direction, form and dosage determined by the being, A. In the same way, a hypnotist's ability to mesmerize a man and to carry out some modifications on his physical, physiological and psychological states occurs again in the same manner. That is, he influences him by contacting his own magnetic field with the magnetic field of his subject. Likewise, in a spiritism session, materialization phenomena called ectoplasm by mankind occur as well, as a result of influences sent by incorporeal beings contacting their magnetic fields with the magnetic field of the medium and transmitted from this field to the medium's body, bringing out material changes, dispersions, gatherings. Again, physical mediums' influence on things, telepathies, sympathies, antipathies, transmissions and other such material phenomena among individuals, always occurs through this mechanism. That is, all of these occur by generating various transformations in matter combinations with influences upon magnetic fields, which are connected to them. We also mentioned previously that the occurrence of great natural events such as an earthquake, the eruption of a volcano, or the emergence of a flood, is ensured through influences sent to the magnetic field of Earth by beings in duty. Other than these influences we have listed, there are some simple influences, simple values which are cruder and pertinent in the secondary degree to these influences. For example, influences like chemical reactions occurring in a body, medicine given to patients, which we call crude charges or crude values because they are even cruder relative to the value differentiations of the duality unit of an atom, even of a molecule. Yes, again, an intense passage. It looks like from here we can go into various topics this evening.
Yes. First of all, of the four groups of influences the book explains, what was the fourth one? They were values that become crud quantitatively. These were initially prime influences and after was used in a matter combination they become modulated as crude influences that are stored and if needed, utilized in automatic activities. And the best example of this is the magnetic fields. How does a magnetic field emerge? Our friends may remember, but let me briefly tell again. First, we have an amorphous milieu, and from outside of the universe two influences enter, prime values and evolutionary values. These influences bring out a focal point or nucleus in the center of matter, and as other particles gather around this, by this motion and movement, the initial magnetic field emerge. And later we read that wherever there is gathering of matter or materialization, there is always a magnetic field of that gathering. And also, we read in this book that as more matter gather, that field is called the magnetic field synthesis. And about the third group of influences, what did we read? The influence matter and bodies exert on each other is possible by the exchange of these magnetic fields as a result of contacts with each other. And these are named as the secondary influences. Of course, the working mechanism is very important here. If you remember, during the initial gathering of matter particles around a nucleus by the evolutionary values and prime values, we have seen a main factor which was established by the original principle, within the structure of matter. This main factor is the duality principle and the value differentiation. Therefore, all these events we read here, such as telepathies, sympathies, antipathies, transmissions, hypnotism, materializations in spiritism sessions, in short, all and everything among objects and individuals occur like this. An influence coming from a magnetic field causes a differentiation in the values of another magnetic field, and then, the equilibrium of the second magnetic field needs to be restored. And again, if you remember, due to the duality principle, everything is a duality unit, and our universe works by this principle. What is a duality unit? An equilibrium of two opposite parts. And when an influence comes to a duality unit and its magnetic field, a value differentiation occurs between two opposite parts or polarities. This creates a flux from one polarity to another to restore the equilibrium. And this brings out motion. Let me repeat, again, all those sympathies and antipathies that is mentioned in this passage, between humans, between animals, between plants, between humans, animals and plants etc. is all about the exchange of influences between magnetic fields, either they attract each other or repel each other. Yes, this is all I could think for now.
What I understand from this passage is that when the superuniverse influence descend into the universe and after constituting matter, these influence gets modulated within the structure of matter, maybe I can say, it becomes less intense, and then, now as the influence of matter, it is emitted from matter's magnetic field in accordance with matter's level of development or matter's ability to respond to other secondary influences coming from other matter. That is, when an influence arrives at matter, it doesn't remain as it is. Matter changes the quality of this incoming influence, and sometimes, matter of the magnetic field synthesis does not or cannot reflect this influence as it is or in same ratio. This reminds me that we sometimes see the burnout healers. When they assume that the healing influence is coming from themselves or they heal only by giving from their own energy, they become exhausted. However, when they are aware that they are only a conveyor for the healing influence and do healing with this intention, while they can sustain their own energy, they can also do healing without any burnout. Knowing that this process is for conveying the healing influence from one magnetic field to another, may help all healers in this regard. And when I read here about the materialization phenomena in the spiritism sessions, I also think of telekinesis phenomena displayed by Uri Geller. He was so popular in the 70s. I remember a documentary about him. Geller was isolated in a room, inside a glass cage, were no electric signals etc. present. He was still twisting or knotting wire cables by his magnetic power, that is, his magnetic field. And his magnetic field was so strong that people watching him on TV could bend spoons or forks in their homes, probably creating a common field by adding their own magnetic field to Geller's. Also, I met a person who can close doors if he can concentrate his attention toward an open door. And about this materialization phenomena in spiritism sessions, I am sure you also saw that rose stem that materialized during a session done in our society. It had appeared in the air and fall to the medium's lap. We still keep it framed at a wall of our society center. Or psychic surgeries done in Brazil. Or what tabloids call as magnet humans that metal objects stick to their bodies and don't fall down. Or bioresonance machines that are in trend nowadays. These can measure frequencies of emotional states, elements you lack or have too much just by sending signals to the magnetic field of our body and measure and interpret the feedback. Again, some of our friends may remember that at the first International Parapsychology Conference our foundation organized in Istanbul, it was in 2005, one of the presenters was Konstantin Korotkov, a Russian biophysicist from St. Petersburg University, who introduced his gadget, using gas discharge visualization technique or GDV, which is a kind of Kirlian photography for real-time viewing of the human energy system. By measuring the magnetic field of fingers, he could create an aura map and diagnose many illnesses. Well, I can give more examples, but I think it is very significant that this knowledge about the magnetic fields was given in a spiritual communiqué to Mr. Ruhselman in 1958 or 1959, whereas today we find so easy to understand magnetic fields or waves.
Yes, I agree. What you said about preventing the healer's burnout problem reminded me something else. Scientists working on human brain discovered that frequencies with the Schumann resonances and the frequency of the human brain's alpha waves are very similar. Schumann resonances are the natural vibrations between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere. If people, when in alpha state, can tune into these frequencies and imagine that they are getting vibrations from this Schumann field, the healing influences on their hands increased. Researchers measured this increase in many experiments. This is interesting because soon we will read in the further pages of this book that how the influences gain values as they go higher and lose values as they go lower. So, this research is a good example displaying the flow and effect of the healing influences. Also, here we read occurrences of great natural events such as an earthquake, the eruption of a volcano, or the emergence of a flood. Again, all of these are examples of this duality mechanism working with the value differentiation and how this mechanism renders changes in the magnetic fields. As you know, the main factor of the magnetic field of our planet is the molten iron layer, which is almost in the center. And researchers are working on the detected changes the magnetic field of Earth. This book states that a sojourner planet is gradually approaching towards our solar system and its magnetic field is already affecting our planet's magnetic field. Of course, scientists do not have an idea about this knowledge, but they work hard to understand why our planet periodically enters the influence of intense magnetic fields. Some scientists think that the orbit our planet follows in the Milky Way directs us into an intense magnetic field belt. And what does this magnetic field? It causes changes in the values of the iron core of our planet. Indeed, change starts from the center. This may sound as an esoteric knowledge, but this is what really happens. Our change starts from our center when the iron core is influences, and volcanoes become active right away, earthquakes happen, etc.
And our planet is relatively young. In that sense, its interaction with other celestial bodies is more. Here, in this passage, the most important point is that all those natural events is ensured through influences sent to the magnetic field of Earth by beings in duty. And what you said about the scientists studying these periods or cycles our planet goes through intense magnetic field belts, reminded me the astrologers studying the natural or sociological events recorded in history to correspond these with the certain conjunctions of the planets, and making predictions for future events when such conjunctions will be repeated. Also, I read in this passage, influences like chemical reactions occurring in a body, medicine given to patients, which we call crude charges or crude values. I think, because Mr. Ruhselman was a medical doctor, his expertise plays a role for such examples in these spiritual communiques given. And, due to my more than a decade experience in the pharmaceutical sector and clinical research, this part is more meaningful for me. Yes, when we take a medicine, we load a crude value to our body. This medicine changes duality unit values of molecules, and even of the atoms, and this causes a value differentiation. And as this differentiation may be good for some organs, it may be harmful for other organs. I think, in that sense, naming these as crude influences is so apt. Yes, I continue reading. As matter influences other matter, or as influences pass from one matter combination to another body or matter combination, they go through some changes, simplifying as they descend and complicating as they ascend. The reason for this is as follows. As passing from one matter unit to a lower matter unit, because the sum part of the values, which is the content of the influences, is used in the higher unit, that influence descends to the lower unit as partly erased relative to its initial arrival and losing some of its values, so this state automatically protects the lower unit from the damage of a strong influence. And this constitutes one of the filtering mechanisms established for the safety of beings and matter in the universe. These mechanisms are necessary for matter. In order to emphasize their worth, we will consider Earth as an example. Direct and indirect influences, billions of times billions, arrive at our world from the sun, the moon, stars, other celestial objects and planets, and a network of influences embraces the whole world. It is possible to guess the innumerable amount of the total of influences in hundreds of thousands arriving at each separate particle of beings and matter in the world. Thus, among these incoming influences there are, of course, the ones that can cause great damage to the world. However, apart from the regulation mechanisms belonging to the sources of sublime influence coming from way above, there are some filtering mechanisms, for the secondary influences, established around the world, which are protecting the world from harm by filtering strong influences. The aim of these filtering mechanisms is to ward off influences which are too strong for the world to bear. By means of these various mechanisms, some part of those influences bypasses the world, without reaching it. Another filtering mechanism is the protecting mechanism established in the atmosphere by the influences coming from the sun. This alters and renders some radiations and influences harmless, like excess radiations coming from outside or created artificially on Earth, which may cause great damage to the world. This operates in such a way that they do not interfere with vibrations coming from the sun or from here and there, as long as they are not detrimental to the world. However, starting from the moment the dosages of these vibrations exceed certain limits to reach a state that can make the world aggrieved, this mechanism in the atmosphere starts automatically to work and continues to work until rendering those detrimental or maybe deadly radiations harmless, and when it has decreased their dosages to a normal level, stops its activity. For example, if there were not such a mechanism in the atmosphere, radioactivity produced in the world could cause many deaths. These kind of filtering mechanisms, besides others, exist almost for all objects, all matter. Thus, as influences descend, decreasing of their values becomes a kind of filtering mechanism for the safety of the lower ones. And the complication of influences as they ascend from lower matter to higher matter is because of this. Ascending influences, as they are going up, meet with a wider field of influences, as a necessity of the structure of that level. By sympathizing with the influences there and receiving values from them, they widen their constitutions, and in this way, become more complex. Therefore, an influence, as it descends and leaves some part of its values at each stage it stops by, descends while weakening and then vanishes. As going up, it ascends while increasing by receiving new values from each stage. This state is an imperative result of functions performed by the influences as they advance among matter, and as well, a necessity that allows them the possibility of each finding milieus which are sympathetic to them in the stages they stop by as they descend. If there were not these filters and these mechanisms, there would be various unfusibilities between matter and influences descending to being and matter combinations in order to render necessary changes in accordance with the evolutionary necessities, and these influences could often be detrimental instead of beneficial. All of these influence regulation mechanisms are again under the control of the superior influences carrying sublime necessities. Yes, this is a long passage but explains the reasons why the changes occur in the influences as they go up and go down.
Yes. For example, in the first part of this passage we read, "Among these incoming influences there are, of course, the ones that can cause great damage to the world." Here, there are two mechanisms we know about our planet. One of these is our magnetosphere, that is, the magnetic field of our planet, which is built and sustained by the beings in duty. What does this magnetosphere do? It averts other high-level magnetic influences coming from the Sun and the outer cosmos, and only lets in the sufficient amount of these influences. And when we see auroras that happen around South and North Pole regions, it means that there are some weak spots in the magnetic field of our world, and some of these magnetic influences comes through our atmosphere. Maybe, our friends can remember that, I think, it was 10 or 15 years ago, there were big sun flares and consequently, widespread blackouts happened in many countries and our communication satellites couldn't function. Therefore, our magnetosphere is very important for the life on Earth. So, here, this is the possible damage mentioned in this passage. After this, we read. There are some filtering mechanisms, for the secondary influences, established around the world, which are protecting the world from harm by filtering strong influences. This is the field in our atmosphere which we heard more and more in the last 30 years. This is the ozone layer which filters the ultraviolet light and other radioactive radiations and protects the life on Earth. Another important point is these kind of filtering mechanisms besides others exist almost for all objects, all matter. Thus, as influences descend, decreasing of their values becomes a kind of filtering mechanism for the safety of the lower ones. Therefore, this is a mechanism we can use in our own magnetic field, as well. We have a right to do this, it is even beyond a right, it is intrinsic for the people who know how they can use this imaginatively. We don't necessarily internalize all influences coming from our vicinity. Let some of them be averted by our magnetic field. For example, people may wish that negative influences of all kind to be vanished completely, but this is not right, because some of these negative influences must reach to our organism. However, our magnetic field may function as a filter, as well. Please remember that in our previous videos we read that our development is only possible by interacting with other people. And what is this interaction? It means that besides the positive influences, negative influences will also come from them. If we try to cut out all those negative ones, honestly, it would be deceiving ourselves. Let's say, you want to keep away the influences that make you angry, then, you couldn't learn managing or controlling anger.
Yes, by isolating ourselves, by going to the mountains of Tibet and living in the monasteries, there is not much advancement in our development. We need learning within more complex interactions in life.
Yes, I am sure that you can build a perfect magnetic field around yourself, especially with the influences of those regions, but how this correspond with your evolutionary or developmentary needs, that's not certain.
Yes, keep your calm if you can when you are stuck in the rush hour traffic in Istanbul on a Monday.
Yes. And another concrete example for establishing this filtering mechanism firmly in our minds is the small hothouses in my region. There are bigger ones, but small-sized hothouses are more in numbers. Normally, the planting time for the seedlings of the fruits and vegetables that will be harvested in summer is spring, but farmers who aims for a bigger yield plant those seedlings in winter and cover them with plastic covers and make those small hothouses. Why? Because they protect the seedlings from the harsh conditions of the winter. Those seedlings need a warmth of 15 to 20 degrees Celsius, but right now it is around 0 or 5 degrees Celsius. So, those plastic covers function as a protective influence layer which reduce the extreme influence to the level that matter needs, and by this, let that matter continue its existence within its structure and continue its service to its vicinity. Of course, we have also an additional knowledge, stated in the further pages of this book, but I will read it here. The farther the being that will send influence to a man is from that man, that is, the greater the difference is in evolution between them, the more the numbers of the transformative fields or transformer stations that influence will go through until it reaches where that man is. That is, so stronger the influences are and higher its source is, more transformer stations they need to go through, so until they reach to the intended structure of the being, they lose a large portion of their strength.
Perhaps, the knowledge conveyed with the religious texts and esoteric teachings about the layers of heaven point to these mechanisms of influence and filtering or transforming stations. And your words reminded me that the fact is we cannot jump from one reality to a higher reality. First, that higher reality sends its influences down, but the important point is here, as it sends these influences a lower reality, a part of these influences are used up there. That's another reason of why these influences come down entirely. Otherwise, it would be hard for us to attune or adapt to these influences. So, everything is gradual, step by step. And this mechanism is valid while we send influences above, as well. Let me read from further pages of this book a related part. Prayers may be reflected up above, to a certain distance. The length of these distances depends on the sincerity, rightness, and degree of intensity of the wishes the prayers offer above while praying. Some prayers cannot traverse long distances, and remain below. These are weak, and because of this they do not encounter beings powerful enough to realize them. And this should be so. Some prayers can reach up to very long distances. These are powerful wishes, coming from the essence and founded on true evolutionary needs. There are more possibilities for these prayers, which can reach powerful beings, to be realized. This is very important. So, the level of our influences resonates with other similar level of influences of other beings. And what happens? We send crude, low vibrational influences, let's say when we gossip, thinking about someone negatively or harbor hateful feelings about someone. Then we act together with the same level vibrations, emotions, feelings, thoughts, and matter systems. This is sympathization. Or as known today, the power of attraction. Indeed, whatever level our influence is in, it sympathizes with other similar level of influences coming from other beings, and that level of vibrations gains a larger field within us. Indeed, it is a warning signal for the people who practice or utilize black magic or put a curse on people. Because this mechanism works like a boomerang, it will come back to that person but with stronger cause and effect chains. In that sense, it is beneficial for all of us to become aware of the influences we welcome to our magnetic field, what we think, what we feel, what our intentions are, what we eat, which kind of music or reading we are engaged with, and electronic tools and gadgets we use, the time we spend using our mobile phones, etc. If we can utilize this knowledge in our daily life by making more conscious choices, maybe we can become more able to use our own filtering mechanisms for better protection. Yes, let's continue reading. Influences are the states of extra-universe truths which are reflected to matter. Again, these are the influences reflecting the reactions exhibited by matter to the outside of the universe. Influences, after they stimulate a matter, bring out a chain of consecutive influences by causing, with the motions of that matter, motions of other matter, and with these, motions of more other matter, which is a kind of automatism. There are myriad deeds executed with such automatisms. However, such consecutive automatic activities also occur only under the controls of descending influences, coming from above, from the beings in duty. The influences we have mentioned so far in outline enter matter structures in the state of various matter combinations with their endless variations and ensure the innumerable exchanges between matter. All of these influences envelop the universe through and through, as a complicated network, which no human comprehension can grasp. In every particle of these, the sublime necessities of the original principle govern. All of these influences, despite their endless variations, perform their functions as a single power which had manifested in the subtlest matter of the universe within the great harmony of divine order. Everything that had been qualified by mankind as material, moral, corporeal, spiritual, starting from the first particle of the universe to its whole, could only advance in the inclusive order and arrangement of these influences carrying the necessities of sublime principles. For the ones who can intuit this point in all its details, it is practicable to comprehend that no flux or occurrence that is devoid of influences can be possible in the universe.
No flux or occurrence that is devoid of influences can be possible in the universe. Well, this reminds me the study meetings we held with our members in the earlier times, and if we asked, "Are influences matter?" our friends were puzzled. Of course, when we say influence, we think that this must be a concept beyond the material realm. However, after the disclosure of this book, now we can easily say that all influences are matter. We even read in this passage, "Influences are the states of extra-universe truths which are reflected to matter." Previously, the book had stated this as, "We can only understand the advancing parts of the powers coming from the original source, as influence. The true disposition and states of the ones that remain outside the universe are unknown for the universe's inhabitants. That is, we don't know anything about what happens and exists outside the universe. However, when these forces reach our universe, we see everything that happens as influences." For example, in the first paragraph again, there is this mention of influences, stimulating a matter, so this is a process of differing the values with the duality mechanism. And this stimulation brings out, let me read, "A chain of consecutive influences by causing, with the motions of that matter, motions of other matter and with these, motions of more other matter, which is a kind of automatism. There are myriad deeds executed with such automatisms. However, such consecutive automatic activities also occur only under the controls of descending influences, coming from above, from the beings in duty." At this point, we can play a clip. When I watched this clip about domino tiles, it reminded me this part of the book. I hope it can help our friends, as well, to imagine the working of the universe. As you watch this clip, please try seeing this in the light of the paragraph I just read. The being that built the system has a plan. There is plan. There is an intended target or aim. And for this target to be reached or realized, after the first stimulus occurred, there are consecutive and automatic chains of influences that follow each other.
Yani bu son paragraftaki bilgilerle şey yapmaya çalışalım. Seyretmeye çalışalım.
I hope this clip gave an idea to our friends how these influences consecutively influence each other in a sort of automatic manner.
Considering the work done here to arrange these domino tiles, please try to imagine the amount of work the divine organizations do. As each one collapses on the other tile, I was thinking this. A system collapses, let's say like natural disaster, but also stimulates the start of another system, for example social events as the consequences of natural disasters.
Of course, it is mind-blowing when we try to imagine the plan behind all of these that exists. Here, we must always remember that all those beings in duty are working non-stop in our universe, under the light of the original principle, in accordance with the mechanism of destiny and by utilizing time mechanism. This is an immense branching out and at the same time, an immense unity. I mean, everything is intertwined, by branching out to everything, everything is encompassed and nothing is left to its own devices. Well, when we ponder on this, we feel relieved, and at the same time, we delve into deeper thinking that may lead to new flows of knowledge, information and influences coming from this system that is working non-stop, moment by moment.
I think, dear Tümerhan, we are, as human beings in this system, are like those domino tiles. Yes, we expect such things to happen, but we have no idea from which direction things will come. From right? From left? From above? From below? Most of the time events happen multidirectionally, and after the system or the reality we got used to collapses and we turn to blaming the mechanism, we rebel against it. However, if we can have a wider outlook, a wider perspective, we could see more causality chains leading such events. In this clip, we were seeing the domino tiles from outside and we could see the next event even before it happens, and we could see that as one tile collapses, an entirely new system will start. Yet, from our standpoint in life, we don't have that wider perspective. And this is true for the inevitable event of death, as well. Instead of remaining a collapsed domino tile, if we consider death as an ending, we can become the observers of all those domino tiles by knowing that the being has the chance to review that last life in the body and make comparisons with its essential knowledge and to understand that there is a wider standpoint to see the system of the universe. As we read and understand the knowledge given in the divine order and the universe more and more, I am sure our perspective will widen because our comprehension will widen.
Yes, as you said, this movement from that single domino tile in an automatic state towards a wider state of comprehension means gradually understanding the chains of cause and effect one by one. It means that looking at things in life with gradually widening perspective. And this means, to become able looking at the system from increasingly higher levels. This gradual process is valid in the plan of duty, as well. When the beings reach the skirts of the plan of duty, they are only able to execute duties in small scale because they can only attune to these. However, as their comprehensions get in harmony with the necessities, with the original necessities feeding the whole universe, what's happening? They become able to look at the level of that domino tile from a higher ground, and when they reach to the uppermost point, then they become able to be one with the knowledge of what things will start and will end, of which tile will topple when, of which tile will influence the which tile within in a single occurrence, and after all, this is what we name as the systems becoming built.
Alright, I continue reading. After giving this general knowledge about the flux of influences, it is also necessary to talk about the functioning that occurs between universe parts, about how this functioning accrues, and finally, about the results brought about in their final targets. Because, for the organization systems constituting the basic structure of communal evolutionary life in the universe to be better intuited, we must go further in the knowledge of this topic. Organization systems complement each other with the interinfluence mechanism. Nevertheless, it is necessary to explain that the influences are not isolated but are together with organization systems and the mechanisms building these systems. I think we have not much to say about this paragraph. The book points here to the topics it will begin to explain. So, I continue reading. The universe is an organization through and through. However, within this great organization, organizational forms that emerge as states of organ-organizer start only from a certain stage of the universe and continue until a certain stage. States of organizing which remain above and below these occur in the inclusivity of laws and rules belonging to the order and devices of sublime principles which remains outside human comprehension. However, none of these is outside the great universe organization. The parts of universe organizations that can be intuited by mankind occur within organ-organizer relations. An organization works under the organizing of its higher organization. Here, the higher organization which is in the status of organizer, throws light on the lower organization. This light has also come to it from a higher organization. This state continues on up to the unitary. In this way, a projector light, which is shed from the unitary to the whole universe, traverses the duty organizations from upward to downward, which are juxtaposed down to the lowest stages of the plan of duty. Meanwhile, as each organization does its duty with the light it received from the higher one, it also sends that light to the lower organization according to the needs of that organization, which appear as duty. Organizations at all stages and levels of the plan of duty, by the directives coming from the unitary, execute the duties which are their share within the scope of their encompassment and under the light of the directive descending from above.
Yes, with this passage, the book makes an introduction to the topic of organ and organizer. The book talks about this influence which is branched out to the universe from the unitary, and as it flows through plans and milieux, it is conveyed from one plan to another within a relation of organ-organizer. Let's consider the national education system as an example. The ministry establishes a nationwide curriculum and it has to be implemented in every school, first through the ministry, then its aides, then administrators of the ministry in each city, then administrators in each town. The knowledge of this curriculum goes down through these layers of administration and arrives at the school principals. Principals inform teachers about the curriculum, what must be taught to students. And teachers in each school, according to their degrees of capacity and ability, work to convey the content of this curriculum to their students. Wherever we look at in life, we see this organ-organizer influence working. Again, the same is valid within the spirit-being-body relationship. I mean, influences coming from the spirit to the being. After these influences are reflected to the consciousness center in the brain in our body. The consciousness center here is in the state of organizer. Then these influences are conveyed from this organizer to other fields in our brain, and from those fields, they are conveyed to our organs, and from organs to our cells. So, if we can change or widen our perspective, it is easy for us to see this flow of influences through organ-organizer connection.
And again, in the further pages of the book, as we will read the plan of duty in more detail, we will see how the beings in the lower levels of the plan of duty get first duties of guidance, and for organizing the life of an individual. So, the beings begin to the plan of duty by taking duties as individuals. However, as they pass to higher levels in the plan of duty, beings gather as groups for further duties. And this state of gathering becomes wider and wider as a unity of comprehensions, until the uppermost point, which is the unitary. The circle of the systems gets smaller, but their capacity increases. And what started as multitude of individual beings at the lower levels of the plan of duty, as beings go through all those increasingly upward processes, gradually becomes a unity of the comprehensions. What previously sounds like individual notes becomes a single sound that contain all vibrations at that point. Just try to imagine a system, working through the influence of a single sound coming from the unitary, and after reaching each point of the universe, filling each point without exception and in accordance with the necessities, they exist interconnected by complementing and influencing each other without any conflict. And we see the same working in our body, as you said. Or our solar system, or the Milky Way galaxy. Starting from the smallest to the largest, the whole system works by this organ-organizer relation.
I'd like to add something to your words about the circle getting smaller but in capacity, getting larger. This may sound contradictory to our friends, but actually this contradiction displays a property that increases its scope, its extent. That is, a strengthening effect. We must look at all influences we encounter in life from this perspective. That is, influences that seem negative to us is also a part of this whole, and there is a strength, a force we need to gain from them. How? Depending on the situation, by adapting to them or by observing them or by going against them. In short, we need to respond to them, and then we can gain a strengthening, an increase in power, an increase in comprehension by the response we gave to them.
Until this passage, we read influences, but here, the book describes influence as light. And we know that light symbolizes knowledge, enlightenment. When a person is enlightened, she or he comprehends, whatever was unseen or invisible becomes seen, visible with the light. Here, when I read, the higher organization throws light on the lower organization. This light has also come to it from a higher organization. This state continues on up to the unitary. The projector at the top is the unitary, so, the source and point of enlightenment for the whole universe is there. After all, this is where the original influences arrive first and then filtered towards the universe.
Yes, and we will read this example of the projector in the further pages of the book, so we will learn about how the universe gets enlightened. And the book will warn us, don't consider this projector as the original principle, only the force of it that belonged to our universe.
Let me check the questions. I think we have enough time to answer this one. After reading and hearing this knowledge, can we talk about free will?
Well, here, I'd better start to explain what freedom or free will means for us. For us, the freedom is the increase in comprehension. It is richness, but it is not feeling entitled to own the trendiest things. No, the richness is the ability to become aware of why we own this matter. Only when we are that aware, we can say we are getting richer. Or, the feeling of responsibility, which we will read about in the further pages of this book. That is, feeling responsible of others. This is another factor that makes a person freer. Yes, in certain areas of life, it is certain that we are in a game, and if the simile is apt, the necessity of the matrix life is because the imperative of our soul's evolution. That is, her, as Tümerhan, as Tülin, as you, we don't have a right to choose. Sorry, but our souls must evolve, and we don't have any idea what this means. However, gradually as the comprehensions increase, freedom of humans increase, as well, and only after that we can talk about a comprehensive free will. Let's consider a plant cell. Does this plant cell have a chance to say, I don't want to do photosynthesis? No, it doesn't. It does this instinctually, automatically by combining sunlight, carbon dioxide and water to produce a nutrient. It doesn't have a chance to choose, at this point. Yet, as the beings gets developed gradually, the word of freedom begins to display its true meaning. Again, at the initial stages of humanity, we can talk about only a very limited free will, because a human being at these initial stages can act driven by the instincts and events in life. And again, after the spatium phase, if the being needs to build a new body, the being doesn't have a say in choosing this new body and the life plan. The beings in duty state the lacking parts of his development, and to complete things you have to prefer this kind of life. But please remember that after the being is born, this life plan is not mandatory to be implemented dot by dot. We can consider the life plan as a wireframe, and the formations around this wireframe emerge by the choices we make in life. As we mentioned many times, starting from the most primitive body the being builds, and after passing stage to stage by building increasingly complex bodies as its comprehension widens gradually, in the last stage, that is, in the stage of human, the being advances within 500 to 700 lifetimes, and then, we can talk about the free will in the true sense of freedom. If you read the divine order and the universe or watched our previous videos, you may remember that even a spirit, a novice spirit, as it connects to an atom, let alone the free will, it has no chance to influence the atom. Therefore, as we mentioned, let's not underestimate the stage we are in, as humans. This issue of free will becomes immense when the being reaches to the stage of human, which is the last stage of this hydrogen realm.
As you said, we need to examine what we mean when we say free will. Since there is nothing that not been influenced in this universe, then we are subject to these influences. In a way, the system says you will evolve or you will evolve. Yet, as we widen our comprehension, as we understand the mechanism of influences, we start to have a chance to discern which influences we would like to be subject to. We will still be included in the organ-organizer systems, but less and less automatically. Again, in the religious teachings, there is a distinction made between the partial will and the total will. And if we try, we can see the will we assume we have is only partial compared to the total will. It sounds like a paradox, but just because of our standpoint. This reminds me the paradox stated in Taoism: the true Tao exists and yet does not exist. It does not exist and it does not exist. So, when we think and discuss about such topics like free will, it is valid for this system as well. Yes, with these words, let's say good evening to all of friends. See you next week.
Good evening, everyone.